All right, it looks like we're at time, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Janae and I'm with NSCB and the Consultants Training Institute. I want to welcome you to the November 17th edition of the Around the Valuation World. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, to obtain CP credit, you must answer all the poll questions that pop up on your screen during the webcast today. If you have an ABW subscription, you will see the CP certificates in your NACB.com portal after 7 to 10 business days. If you have any questions on today's webcast, please use the Q&A feature. It's also directed to the presenter. If you have any technical questions or questions about NACBA, feel free to reach out to us using the chat feature as well. As those will be directed to the panelists. Alina, can you go to the next screen?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay. So with Around the Valuation, we tried to cover all the hot topics in the industry that's happening. Within the 2 hours each month, we're unable to do all of the information that's provided. So there are some links to some additional resources if you're interested in staying abreast with what's going on in the industry. And with that, I am going to turn the time over to Alina and Mel, who will get us started today.
Thank you, Shanda. And today is going to be a little bit different in terms of our order, but we are going to have some of our normal presentations. So we are going to have the grow and build your brand that usually is at the beginning. We are going to have it at the end. I'm sorry. We are going to have it at first. Then we are going to have Janae with the industry headlines. We are going to have Stephen White. He's going to be interviewing Emmet Mulcahy, and they are going to be talking about ESOP. And after that, we are going to have Alan Zipp. He's going to be interviewing one of our judges. And with them also is going to be Mr. Kaplan. Later, after that presentation, we are going to have Dalton Hopper. He's going to be talking about the standard and ethics, and they are going to be discussing, he's going to be discussing understanding professional standards in today's environment. Then at the end, we are going to have Janae again, and she's going to be interviewing Dr. Abbot, and they are going to be talking about the option model, the DLOM calculator. And so it's my time now. I'm going to be talking a little bit about a tool, and let me present myself, I guess. I'm Alina Rivera. I'm one of your co-hosts at the show, and I am a business evaluator too. I do some advisory services. I worked for a long time in an international accounting firm. Now I have my own firm. So, as most of our members, I have a small but mighty team. So I don't have now that big structure that when you are in a big accounting firm you have. So this is why when we were discussing the options for this show, we decided, okay, what is working for me in LinkedIn? Maybe there are people that may found it useful. So that is why we are going to be talking today about LinkedIn. And when we were looking for a title, we discussed that LinkedIn is the new golf course. Why? Well, I am not a LinkedIn expert. I have to say that first. I am not a LinkedIn expert. I am not a LinkedIn coach, not a marketing strategist. I already told you what I do. And definitely, I'm not an influencer and I'm not trying to be that. But I wanted to talk about LinkedIn. And it's not about doing reels, dancing, because even when I'm a Puerto Rican, I don't know how to dance at all. I have two left feet. But even with that, there are things that can work for you, even if you don't have, a lot of money to pay for marketing or for marketing tools. And right now, the reality is that LinkedIn is more your, think of it as not your resume as it was before, because before your LinkedIn, it was okay, and mine was too. Let's put my resume in there, my CV, just my information. It was like a digital resume, but it's not that anymore. And I understand when people talk where, well, networking is important, relationship are important, and that is true. But if you want to reach out to the newer, youngest generations, it's not about anymore going to the golf course. I remember when I started 26, 27 years ago in this profession, they will tell you, not as young as anymore, right, Mel? But when I started in this profession, they will tell you you would need to learn how to golf because that's where the client were. And even when you were staff, that's where your partners were going to be. But today, it's not necessarily true. Yes, you may have clients that you're still going to reach that way, but it's not the norm. And some of us are kind of difficult, or it is difficult for us to understand how the world is changing in a way, and we may stick to this is what it worked before, but the reality is you need to go over and change if you want to grow a practice and to make sure that every month you have new clients, you have a pipeline. And today is more about this new generation, and I'm not talking about generation alpha, the 22, 23. I'm talking about those senial millennials. I have an experience that someone else was asking a prospective client if he wanted to go and have lunch, to meet each other, to have lunch. And this person, this CEO, 30 something, just looked at me and he was annoyed. And he just told me that he didn't want it to, he could pay for his lunch. It was a waste of time for him to go in his car or to take the train and then go over to a place when that was easier done on on Teams or Zooms. So right now, people will go over to DMs or comment on your posts, and that's the way they are gonna know you. So yeah, it is important to know LinkedIn. And the reality is LinkedIn has 1.1 billion users. So we'll say here in Puerto Rico, like the world is, how you say it, an oyster, for example, pañuelo. So there's a lot of people in there that you can go, and they have 41% are millionaires. I don't know you, but that's the type of client that I want. And 4 of 5 of members in LinkedIn are business decision maker. So yeah, it is really important. And one of the things that I recently discovered is that actually with AO, intelligence optimization, before we hear a lot about SEO, but now AI look for information to refer people. So these new generations are using AI as Google, as you and I used Google before, and actually AI is gonna recommend people. So if I put it in ChatGPT, for example, I'm looking for a business evaluator located in San Juan, Puerto Rico. AI is gonna recommend some of those, and how the AI does it. It looks at your profile. Obviously, it has to be a public profile. Your post for a certain length, and newsletter that you may have. So that's the reason why it's so important. It's not only about your Google business profile, it's also about your profile as the owner of that business and as the expert. And how you can, show up. There are different ways that you show up on those when those tools look for you. And what is important with that is that you need to optimize your profile. Remember, I'm not an expert. Maybe there are 100 of ways that can work. And I put on the chat a prompt that I use to improve and optimize my profile, the things that we are going to be talking now. So use that prompt, change it in a way that, for example, the prompt says, if you have it in you and you open it, I send it as a PDF, the prompt will set the tone. In my case, I have already defined what is my tone, because in my case, it's not about being professional. My experience is that whenever we post a corporate post, very technical, very as a book, by the book. It doesn't have a lot of track as if it's my personality. So that is really important. Why? Because if you look at what I write in my LinkedIn, you will see that if you don't like me, then probably you're not my client. So it's better for you to know me through what I write, right? So let's do something. I know that you have the presentation with you, and but I prefer to take the minutes that I have left so to show you because there are simple things that you can do for free. And for example, if I'm going to take mail as an example, in the presentation you have the headlines, and this is, this area, all this area is the one that we were going to talk about. So this is the header. In my case, if you go to mine is not optimized. I just have my logo, right? But if you open Mel's, you will see what he does. Remember, this is like your digital storefront. It's like you sell shoes. People go there and look at what you're selling. So if I open Mel's, you will see he's a money mentor, he's a CPA, he's a speaker, valuation. So it's already there. That's prime real estate, and it's there. So that this is a good example. And then you will have his name, you will have what he does in here and where he is located. So this is a great sample, and these are the areas that you're gonna find on that prompt. And when you look at the about, I remember when I started LinkedIn, it would be just a copy and paste of my CV. But you need to think about if you were communicating with a client over a coffee, what you do, who you help, and how you can help those clients. So in this area, you will see different information. And again, this is a great example. If you look and go to mine, for example, as I mentioned, I don't know where I went. Okay, as I mentioned, yeah, this is not the best one, right? The cover one, not the best one. It's just my branding. But you can tell I'm a CEO of advising. I do business valuations and forensic. I am a financial strategy because I offer CEO mentorship and fractional CFO services. I am passionate about volunteering, but also I am kingdom focused and client centered. If those are things that you don't like, probably I'm not your person, right? But in here, I specify what I do. It's not only I study here, I did this, because there are other areas where you can expand on what you do. So that you can do free. You can look for people around. But there is a tool, and I'm going to go over quickly over the tool because the same things that the tool does is the same things that you can do manually. These tools, Sales Navigator, I have nothing to do with the tool. I'm not get paid for the tool. It's just I just wanted to show you. And it's interesting because if you pay for tool, it's $59.99 right now. You will see that if I look to the people that I have on my profile, I cannot see who they are because they are private. But if you have the tool, you will know. One of the things that is important for networking LinkedIn is that you interact with these people. So now I can go to their profiles and I can comment on them. And that is what with this tool you can do. So you have the way to use it on the one of the PDF that I attach. But what you can do and think of it as you can do manually, and you can create filters. So in my case, for this particular sample, I just created this group. And once you have the group, then you can connect to them and you can send them message. So you will see that trying to do a good, for you to remember, I use the word scale. And when you use the word scale, you will search for the people and remember it because you can use it without this tool. You can search for the people. You then will look for the people that is specifically to you. So all the lawyers that I want to reach out because I do litigation super engagement in my area. Once you have those, then you connect to them. You look at their profiles, you interact with their comments. And I don't recommend for you to pay for these tools that will do that automatically because definitely you want to be you. One of the things that is important and that have worked for me on LinkedIn is being you. I have a newsletter, and that's a tool that you can use. But whenever that newsletter, at the beginning, the first two, you can tell it's very corporate. It didn't have the track. And LinkedIn is not about just having a huge connection. I post twice a week. I have a weekly newsletter. You can have it bi-weekly or every month. It doesn't matter. It's just do it. Just be consistent. It's not about a lot of content. It's about being consistent. And then I will take 10 to 15 minutes every day and I'll look for connections that I already have. And I look at their comments and I will comment on their posts because probably they have people that are not my main connection, my number one connection, but that I can they can see my post and then they will reach out. And I have had colleagues that just because they are seeing my post, they will remember that I offer business valuation services and they will refer clients. So I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot is about just how to grow our practices. And we believe this is a good way to do it, just using LinkedIn and then just measuring the things that you have on your profile. So I look for my previews, I see people reaching out, I see new connections and conversations, and I'll make sure all the time that I sound like myself. So I use Spanglish all the time. So I will do that on my posts and my newsletter. I'll be consistent. So in my case, I decided to have a newsletter every week, and I have been consistent with that. I don't program it. I post it because I want to make sure that if someone responds to my newsletter, I'm there to respond to that. And then I am strategic in terms of which people I'm connected to and commenting to because I want to be strategic and just reach out to decision makers. So I hope this helps you. And if you have any questions, I can talk to you about whatever works for me. So anytime I am available for you, I have my LinkedIn connection in here in case you want to use it. And I think it's my time. And now I don't have Alina just showing up, right? I just have Janae doing that for me. So, oh no, I have more time. So I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to do a lot of things today. So let's take the 3 minutes extra that I have. If you have any questions about how I use it, you can put it on the comments and on the chat, and I'll respond to you. But then let's go back to how I use the tool. And in this particular case, what I do is I will do to home and I will go here to lead filters. And once I'm here in lead sales navigator, but remember, this is the same mindset that you can have to use the tool. I will look to the different filters. Usually I look for industries. I love working with construction claims, construction companies, sorry, doctors, a lot of professional services that I think that's part of my niche. So I will take that, right? I will pick whatever. So let's do lawyers. Let's think about if we have the litigation support engagement, let's use that. So law practices, I will include that. And then I will, in geography, it's suggested Columbus, Ohio. I'm not there. I am not there. So I will add Puerto Rico, but obviously you can add whatever area do you want to. And after that, you can pick whatever other area, for example, connections. You can pick which connection with level of connection. First connection is those that are already connected to you. Second degree connections are going to be those that, for example, in Mel case, maybe they are connected to Mel. So they are connected to one of my connections. That would be a second connection. And a third connection would be those that are not related to me or one of my friends. So friend of friends, if you know Facebook, for example. And group members are those that are on same members as you are. So you can decide to which people do you want on this leads group. Usually secondary connections are good because you may have people in common that if I want to connect to you and you have questions about me, you're gonna go to that person that you know that we have in common to ask for information. And then once you have that and you have your list, you create a list. In my case, I just put Mel and Janae in here. And whenever you want to interact with them, you can go to these two actions. If you are not connected to them, connect is going to be an option that is going to be here, and you can message them. But please remember, message them in a way that is good for them. It's I have just recently someone sending me a message, and it was a couple of days after my father passed. If they have went to my profile, they will have noticed that it wasn't the time to reach out the way they did. And after that, I'm not connected to them again. They were just trying to sell something. And even if I know the person, I can tell either it was a tool but it was very impersonal and even kind of rough. So I'm not their client, right? So make sure you connect with people and interact with people in a way that is useful for them, but also that it's you are creating that relationship. Like you went to a conference and then you keep talking to them and building that connection with them. Because in the future, it's not that it's going to happen in a month, but maybe 3, 6 months ahead, if you keep being constant, you will see that this is going to bring results to you, and it's going to bring extra clients. So yes, now it's the time. I right now I am going to disconnect sharing because I know that Janae is gonna connect, but I can tell um, the Brian make a comment, so it's very interesting. There are different sources in NACVA, so you can go over there, and you also have your polling question in front of you. So make sure you respond to that so you can have all your credits for this conference. And now I'm going to leave Janae so she can go over all the industry headlines. Janae.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Alina. That's great. That's good information. And I see that we have not connected on LinkedIn in a while. That's probably because we are connecting in other ways so frequently. So,
Exactly.
all right. So great. There are so many articles this month. So buckle up. Robot mode activated. We're going to go through a lot of what's happening in the valuation world. And I'll give you a little bit of a preview and see some of the articles that you may want to follow up on and read yourselves or put into your practice. We're going to talk about a recent case, Huntsman, that was discussed in Perspectives by Will Emmet Management Associates in October 2025. We're going to talk about best practices for valuing FLPs. This was in BV Update by Bruce Johnson. There's also a new feature in Deal Stats called the pure play multiple. We're going to discuss that. The privacy concerns for client data was discussed in a video that Colin Brown posted to the Quick Read. Rod Burkert discussed the referral reciprocity dilemma, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit. The 2026 proposed physician fee schedule was released, and there was an article by Todd Zickrang and Jessica Bailey-Wheaton in the Quick Read in October. We also have Mythbusters, Hardball with Hitchner publication, and discussing buying a job transactions and whether or not those can be used to value small businesses. There's some ESOP news from the BV Wire, and also a new study was discussed, finding firm-specific factors drive long-term growth. Okay, so the Huntsman case. Huntsman used hydrogen gas to produce aniline, which is a chemical used in the manufacture of a variety of products, including blue jean dye. So Huntsman got some gases, carbon monoxide and hydrogen gases from Praxair. Praxair allegedly repeatedly failed to provide the contractual levels of those gases, which resulted in lost sales and lost profits over a period of 10 years. The lost sales were presumably not contract sales, but rather spot sales, or like walk-up sales. And because spot sales were typically at a higher price and therefore a higher margin than contract sales, the Huntsman expert's opinion was that there was a reasonably certain floor for the damages based on the margin on the sales that were made. But without a reliable method to tell the exact lost profits, Huntsman's expert based his calculation on the average margin across all sales and clarified that this represented a lower boundary on the actual amount of the damages. Counsel presented the jury with an alternative and higher calculation based on the top third of margins earned over the period. The jury agreed with this higher damages amount. On the first appeal in the Fourth Circuit of Louisiana, this decision was affirmed, finding a reasonable factual basis for the conclusion and that the award was not clearly wrong. On appeal to the Supreme Court of Louisiana, the majority, it was 4-3, so it was pretty split, found that the damages method was unreasonable, resting on speculation and conjecture. The minority said, the dissenting minority found, quote, the record shows that there was sufficient reasonable evidence for the jury to have accepted the lost profits formula, but to have rejected elements of the components thereto. The author is concerned that this type of decision puts expert witnesses in awkward positions when the expert knows there is a range or can only be certain of an upper or lower boundary of the calculation. Or that this pushes valuation professionals to feign a level of certainty in conclusions that sometimes do not exist. So, I skipped some of these objective main takeaway slides. I'm sorry about that. Just like I said, robot mode. Got a little bit excited trying to get to the data, the meat of things. So this is the Huntsman. You can read about that if you are interested. It sounds like an interesting case, and if you're providing damages expert witness testimony, that may be something to be aware of. Okay, best practices for the valuation of minority interests in FLPs and LLCs. The editor's note for this article was that the author, Bruce Johnson, is continuing to receive requests to do a discount study to appraise a minority interest in FLPs. This is kind of a shortcut method that typically uses the net asset value approach and deducts discounts without taking the time to do a proper analysis. This was the editor's note. The editor also said that although these requests are less common than before, there are enough of them to compel the author to write this article. So the author argues that many appraisers are confusing the courts by leaning on a net asset value method when a market-based or income-based method would be more appropriate. The market approach takes the emphasis off of discounts and puts it on determining the proper pricing multiple using comparable entities. Mr. Johnson said that the focus on discounts that have been focusing on the discounts that courts have allowed or averages determined by published studies is driven by an attorney mindset rather than financial decision making. The market approach and the income approach are more prevalent in real-world decision-making and therefore more supportable. So if the net asset value method is not the terminology that we should use, how do we present the income and the market approaches so that they are understandable, supportable, and logical? This was a good article, just interesting, kind of reaffirming some of the things that we've known and seen with some of the cases that have come through and knowing that we can't rely on averages, and then just making you remember how we present things and what we're really doing in the valuation of some of these interests. So good article, go take a look if you have BV Update. Another article from the BV Update was surrounding the pure play feature of deal stats. So in a recent webinar, BVR presented 5 scenarios for dealing with transaction data that intermingles asset sales and stock sales. The article presents the charms, I'll say, and problems with each scenario. So do you just commingle them? Do you only use one or the other? Do you adjust one? Do you adjust stock sales to an asset sale, an as if asset sale? The most popular option from this webinar was relying on the new feature that standardizes, the selling prices to include only fixed assets and intangibles, which I say eliminates the need for manual adjustments and allowing a single consistent comp set. So you need to understand what's going on there. If you're using this pure play, you need to understand, okay, that is all that's included and understand the adjustments that you need to make when applying it to your company. But it does emphasize, understanding exactly what is included in the reported selling price that you may see in that database and other databases. You need to focus on ensuring comparability across your data, which will obviously greatly improve the accuracy and defensibility of your valuation conclusions. So, interesting option available from Deal Stats for the users of that database. All right. Colin Brown has a video from the Quick Read that shows how to protect client data. It discusses which AI apps learn from or may expose client data automatically or upon election and at which subscription levels. So go check this out. It's a very quick way to see what options you may want to select or avoid selecting. Many valuation practitioners struggle with how to show gratitude to referral sources. If you've been there, you know. Rod cites Lee Rosen, who says payback comes in many forms other than cash. The original article was written from an attorney's perspective, but there are good takeaways for professionals in our space. Rod suggests that doing a good job and making the referral source look good may be all that is needed. The original article is linked at the back of the segment along with the Quick Read article. So now, if you're involved in the healthcare space or need to keep up with developments in that industry, you should know that CMS released its proposed Medicare physician fee schedule for 2026. Todd Zickring and Jessica Bailey-Wheaton have a very detailed, helpful article in the Quick Read that discusses many of the proposals by CMS for 2026. In addition to the payment rate changes, CMS proposes a new 5-year mandatory payment model for specialists. Healthcare stakeholders were cautiously pleased with the MPFS proposed rule, largely due to the prospect of the payment increase, although many called the increase underwhelming. So a myth potentially busted in Hitchner's Hardball with Hitchner was, does buying a job exist in the first place? And if so, do those transactions represent fair market value? Hitchner's team looked at the Pepperdine surveys and anecdotes from brokers, which indicate that buying a job is a real phenomenon. He says when the EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings of a business only consists of a reasonable salary, that's not a return. Okay, it's an exchange for work performed and compensation. It has nothing to do with the investment. Okay, so be aware of how seller's discretionary earnings or discretionary earnings is calculated. If you've got this article, just go refresh yourself in how these things may be presented, what they adjust, if they adjust one owner salary, what happens and how you apply that to your situation in the valuation. So he does say that for profitable businesses with a decent return on investment, these types of transactions should not be used. Okay, good news for ESOPs. I'm so excited to hear Stephen's presentation later on ESOPs. Daniel Aronowitz, a longtime supporter of ESOPs, was confirmed as Assistant Secretary of Labor, and he will also lead the Employee Benefits Security Administration. He plans to work to end the war on ESOPs. So the more measured and predictable DOL regulation should lead to greater clarity, less fear of second guessing by regulators for valuation professionals who do ESOP work. So interesting developments. Will be good to see how things proceed from here. All right, finally, a new growth study finds firm-specific factors drive long-term growth. The growth projections should be tied to the company. The study looked at stock returns in the public markets, found that 22% of variation in long-term growth was attributable to firm and industry characteristics such as leverage, barriers to entry, investment activity. This means that relying solely on generic GDP assumption risks mispricing the terminal value, and that company-specific factors provide a stronger evidence-based anchor. Growth projections for the period, looking 10 to 30 years down the road that are based on broad measures like GDP may miss the mark. This article originally appeared in the Journal of Financial and Quantitative Analysis. That article is open access. This article in the BV Wire was a short overview. The original article is about 40 pages. So I've linked that also at the back of this presentation. So with that, I'm excited to get a little bit deeper into some of these ESOP and expert witness issues, and I'm going to pass it back to Mel or Alina and have you guys move on with today.
Good morning. We'll have a poll question for everyone. And during this break, we have a short video to play. One moment, please.
All right. So let's so many people to honor there, and it's so cool to see them doing the things that they're doing. Now we'll get to move on to our next segment, which is with Emmet, Mulcahy, and Steve White, talking about ESOPs, ESOP valuations, getting recurring work, and managing the risk and all that stuff. So Emmet and Steve, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Mel. And yes, and to Janae's point, this is an exciting time to have a conversation on this. Emmet, my friend, welcome. This is weird interviewing you. You're my friend. And we're in the same space, which is great. Yes, the title of this is we're working on as far as trying to understand what does it mean by reoccurring work and manageable risk. But I thought we would back up just a little because we just experienced, or I should say you did, I wasn't able to attend, probably one of the biggest events that take place in the ESOP space a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas, which is the employee-owned conference that is held every year. So why don't you give us a little highlights of what went on? What is it about, first of all, and some of the highlights from that?
Yeah, so the employee-owned conference, it's one of the ESOP association's big conferences they have throughout the year. And I heard this year that slightly over 2,000 people attended it. It's out in Las Vegas, and this year was nice because it was the first year, at least for me, it hasn't been at Caesar's Palace, but they switched it over to Aria. And with the new location, brought a whole lot of new changes to the conference. And I thought the education tracks and the ability to connect with people was a great overall experience.
Yeah, the attendance number from what I've heard has grown dramatically, and that just is alluded to the fact that there's more interest in this particular space, and more companies are trying to learn a lot more about what's going on in the ESOP. But I will just say this. I am disappointed because they did move it from Caesars over to the new spot, and I was really looking forward to that. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to go there. But for our listeners and viewers who are not as familiar with ESOPs, and I know that we talked about reoccurring revenue, I have my reasons on why I love it, but why don't you give them an overview of what does it mean to have reoccurring revenue?
Well, I mean, it provides some consistency for the valuation practice. Most of my work, maybe like yours, is, one and done transactions. And
Yeah.
I finish the year and then I look at the next year and go, all right, I got to go find a bunch of work to do. And ESOPs tend to be the one type of valuation that I can count on year after year. Within the rules and regulations, they're required to have annual valuations. And, once you get into those are going to be there every single year. And, you can count on that work and revenue, and that helps make, staffing decisions, all kinds of practice management decisions significantly easier when you have some sort of reliable revenue coming in the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I say it every October when we're sitting there putting our plan together for the upcoming year. We already know where we're starting because of the mere fact of this annuitized business. And for those of you who come from the finance background, you know what annuitized business is, and it is really a treat to have. And it, not to say the M&A valuations that we do is not important, because it goes through its ebbs and flows. There are times that we just get inundated, but to your point, it's one and done. After you're done with that valuation, you move on to the next one, and you develop relationships with these companies that you're providing the ESOPs for. And I started off by saying it's weird interviewing you because you're a friend of mine. I probably should have told everybody who you are and what you do here. I know it's in your deck, but Emmet is a partner as well as a valuation special service leader at his particular company where he works for Redpath and Company. Emmet, you've been doing this for a number of years. You've been recognized for a variety of different things. So you are truly a subject matter expert in this particular field. And then when people start to learn a little bit more about ESOPs and looking at their overall companies, there's a lot of information that's out there. And I will say some of the information that is shared with valuation practitioners, it's not always complete. I'm not saying it's not accurate. It's just not as complete. So from a basic standpoint, we know that there's two different types of of ESOPs that a company can get involved with and how they're actually structured. Why don't you give us a quick little brief overview of what those two would be?
Taking a step back first too, not only am I, a professional service provider to ESOPs, but Redpath and Company used to be an ESOP company itself. We were 100% employee owned from 2003 up until about last October. So I've been able to experience both as a participant of it and as a professional service.
Wow. I guess that's another conversation we can actually talk about as far as you being an ESOP owned company, right? So that's fantastic.
To your question, one of the most fun things about ESOPs is that there's no one way to get an ESOP structured or have it put in place. It's, if you know one ESOP, you know only that ESOP. There's a million different ways that this can go. So it's nice when you're able to kind of see what the sellers, shareholders, what their goals are, what their objectives are, and then find a path to an ESOP that aligns with that. And so when you're talking about the different types of ESOPs that are out there, usually it all comes down to how does this ultimately get structured?
Right.
Whether or not you're a pass-through entity S corporation, whether or not you're a C corporation for certain reasons, and then how do they get kind of financed? Is it a leverage transaction where the ESOP or the company is going out and borrowing money to fund the purchase of shares of stock, or there are other non-leverage ways that companies can get the shares over into the ESOP trust?
Yeah, and as valuation practitioners become more knowledgeable in this particular space, you'll begin to learn who are those institutions that are actually assisting in leveraging those particular ESOPs, or understanding how to even structure those particular types of situational ESOPs as well. Now, that's just more of the ESOPs 101. Let's go back to the conference and understanding, because I know there was a lot of buzz going around the conference, and even taking a look at some of the tracks that were actually done. I personally would have gone to all the valuation classes, but there were so many other things out there. And especially in the climate that we're in right now, political wise, where does ESOP fit? What are your thoughts? What did you take away from it? And share with us your thoughts on it as well. And I share mine too.
Yeah,
On that
well,
point.
In addition to kind of what I viewed at the conference earlier this year in, I think, April, I did go out to DC with the ESOP Association, and we went up to the Hill and advocated for ESOPs. So ESOPs tend to be one of the few items that have what seems to be complete bipartisan support. It's really hard to not like them when you start to get into how they benefit employees, how they're getting stakes, and what they're providing for the company, how it keeps jobs local, all those kind of things. It's a real positive all around. I'm a member of our Minnesota and Dakota's ESOP Association chapter, and we recently had all three governors proclamate that October was Employee Ownership Month, and at North Dakota's capital, they actually had a proclamation event to celebrate ESOPs, and they had business leaders, ESOP participants, retired ESOP participants, and there were old, retired ESOP participants that got up and kind of spoke about what the ESOP meant to them, how they were able to retire because of it, and it's those kind of storytelling and messaging that really gets everybody behind ESOP. So they truly have kind of bipartisan support. And I wrote this down. Most recently, the beginning of October, the Senate unanimously passed 2 kind of pro ESOP bills. And so it's making its way through Congress. Like Janae said, there's movement with the DOL and within ESBA to have a little bit more favorable ESOP view. And I think, overall, we're trending in the right directions with ESOPs, and they're only going to become more popular over time.
I agree with you. You mentioned April. That's right. I forgot about the conference in DC. That was fantastic as well, because of the mere fact we had legislation come directly. I know that you went on top of the Hill, but they came directly to the conference as well and spoke to everyone there just to share what their thoughts are as it pertains to ESOPs and what their vision is. And if you think about it, what congressperson wouldn't be interested in a platform that would give job stability, add more jobs to the jobless report, maintain companies here in the United States? What congressperson wouldn't want to do something along those lines?
Exactly.
So those are things that are positive from a political standpoint. There's something that has come up quite a bit, and I'll be remiss if I didn't mention this. We're talking about the ESOP Association right now. That is one of the acclaimed associations for ESOP, but there's also another one. The NCEO has done a phenomenal job over the years of providing research out there for valuation practitioners as well as other service providers out there. So if you're interested, and I'm not plugging either one, but if you're interested in this particular space, obviously you can reach out to Emmet, you can reach out to myself, but I also encourage you just go to their websites and read on those types of things. And it also eliminates some of the misnomer that goes on in regards to ESOP, because there is a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy that has constantly been building as far as ESOPs goes.
One thing I'll say about the ESOP community is, all the professionals seem to be very willing to kind of share their experiences, teach people. When I was coming up learning this thing, it was the other participants and professionals in the industry that really helped me along. And I found the community to be great on all kinds of educational topics and helping new people out.
No, that's true. That is true. This particular community as a whole, even at the conferences, you're meeting other practitioners, you're meeting other ESOP owners, and they will talk your ear off in regards to not only just the positive thing, but what they would have done differently. And which we'll talk about that in a moment, because at the conference, I know that there were a number of different tracks that I saw that I wanted to participate in, like what happens when you receive that offer from your ESOP, meaning private equity is also interested in this particular space. And I have my thoughts on that. I think that there's a ton of money that private equity has, and they've been building this up since 2019, and now they're looking at other avenues. And there's a reason why they're looking at ESOP companies. And when you provide valuations there, did that come up in conversation during the conference as well, as far as what ESOP owners are thinking when private equities are trying to get involved?
You know, it comes up from a transaction standpoint, because if they're going to make offers, ESOPs tend to be really well-run companies. They tend to outperform their peers of non-ESOP companies. So there is a lot of interest in acquiring those. There are, you know, a lot of back and forth classes, things about how to evaluate those offers, whether or not you have to accept them or not. But when it comes to PE, you know, the more recently here is what you get into is private equity trying to come in and use the ESOP name and claim to kind of set up their own type of ESOPs, which I know the ESOP Association is really kind of putting their foot down and making sure that Congress, everybody knows there's a difference between, you know, traditional ERISA ESOPs and what some of the private equity firms out there are trying to come in and say are like ESOPs. And so, you know, when you hear private equity and ESOPs in the same sentence nowadays, it's more along those lines, and trying to delineate and really make sure when you're talking about ESOPs, it's or, you know, ERISA-backed retirement platform and not something else.
Fantastic. And another key phrase that pops up, it has been coming up quite a bit, especially since the beginning of this year, is adequate consideration. And I am almost certain, even though I wasn't there, my ears were burning because I know there was still a hot topic of discussion. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what exactly is adequate consideration, and where are we in that space right now?
So I think the concept of adequate consideration is one of the big risks that are out there within the ESOP world. You know, back when this was established, Congress said that ESOPs can't pay more than adequate consideration for businesses, and then told the DOL to go and kind of clarify what that means. And that was back in 74, and
yes,
to this day that still hasn't happened. So there's this weird, nobody is clearly aware of what adequate consideration means. And from a transaction standpoint, that's an issue, because, you know, what business owner wants to sell their business and not fully know if the purchase price is going to be theirs? You know, they could be subject to a DLOM investigation and, you know, have that changed. And from a professional trustee and valuation standpoint, you know, you think you're doing the best you can, but, you know, without proper rules to follow, it's hard to know for sure. So adequate consideration is a big topic for the ESOP Association, and they're really trying to get some rules and regulations in place to clarify what that means, so everybody has the same game plan and can follow processes that work for everybody, and, you know, make sure we're not having this ambiguous environment anymore.
And you know what's interesting is that I mentioned the ESOP Association and CEO. The ESOP Association has been carrying the flag, in my opinion, on trying to get a little bit more clarity here. And I think with the people that we actually have in place right now in Congress, this will help in that overall area, because we talk about risk. And I think risk is one of the things, and I'll be even more transparent. When I first joined Abbot, and coming from a background of doing ESOPs prior to joining Abbot, ESOPs was always a beautiful platform for exit strategy, but it was constantly shared with me from other practitioners, it's too risky, it's too risky, it's too risky. There's risk in doing a general corporate purpose valuation. So what am I missing here? But it is great to get educated as far as understanding what's going on, and adequate consideration. The more clarity we get on this, the better off that we will be. There's other risk as well that comes into question in the overall process. And you can go into detail about that with your thoughts on risk.
I mean, when it comes to transaction risk, you know, the DOL, I think, kind of echoed some of what you heard, that ESOPs were risky transactions. And there were people who, you know, if you kind of look at it, you're selling to yourself to a certain extent and would manipulate the price to benefit themselves. And those are bad ESOP structures that, you know, ruin the name for everybody else. And at least the ones I'm involved with, and best practice is, to really mitigate these risks is go out and hire the professionals. Get an external trustee. Don't be an internal trustee of your ESOP. Hire valuation professionals that have worked with ESOPs before. The more kind of people that are experienced that you can surround yourself with, the better you are to have a proper transaction. When we go through ESOP transactions, we try to make it look as close to a true third-party deal as you can possibly get. So, typically I'll represent the seller on the sell side team, and we'll have our team built out, and then we'll go out and get an ESOP trustee that represents the buy side, and they'll hire their team. And it truly becomes kind of two parties negotiating to a true fair market value.
It's funny, you talked about hiring an expert to do this. We actually have in our portfolio a company that's an ESOP company, but we were brought on later. They established this, and they had an internal trustee managing this, and they realized very quickly this is above their heads. They actually needed a bona fide trustee, a bona fide accountant, that not just a CPA, not discrediting CPAs, but an accountant that actually understands ESOP transactions, an attorney that understands ESOP transaction. There's a theme here with this. These are experts in those particular fields. Now, somebody that does this once or twice a year, you need somebody who does this and understands it and goes through their regular trainings and skill sets and experience of knowing how to navigate this overall process. That, in my opinion, also helps mitigates a lot of the risk that happens with valuations.
Yeah, these are people's retirement dollars, and so
there
are a lot of eyes on it, and you want to make sure that you're doing yourself and all your participants right.
Yeah, and knock on wood, we've yet to have any issues, and I pray that that continues to operate in that fashion. But I'll tell you, from here at OPG, here's one of the reasons why we do this is because we don't try to for lack of a better phrase, we're not trying to knock the leather off the ball. To your point, we are trying to get this and simulate it very closely to a sell-side transaction. And I believe that the trustees that we work with, the companies that we work with, the employees that we communicate the valuation report to appreciate that even more so. And the communication is very critical. I know that you spend time making sure that everyone is very well aware of what's going on, as well as the employees. And I see Brian, and I see that we're running out of time, but there's one other area that I think is extremely important as far as risk goes, is making sure that you do the first step. And now, one of the things that we bring to the table is called a feasibility study. The feasibility study that we provide out not only gives you a preliminary valuation of your company, and not only tells you about your pro forma cash structure, but it also lets you know whether or not your company is ESOP eligible. And I think a number of companies miss that step, and that could also help mitigate some of their risk. What experiences have you had in that process of doing feasibility studies?
I mean, the feasibility study is the crucial first step in any evaluate or ESOP analysis. Business owners like ESOPs because they hear tax-free nature of it, but they're not fully aware of what it means. And that ESOP or that feasibility study is going to show you kind of what the ESOP is worth, what kind of dollars the seller can get out of it, how much leverage it can handle, and what does that payback period look like. It puts together transaction teams, other components, other SARs or warrants as part of this deal. It really lays out and gives potential selling shareholders a full picture of what this ESOP transaction is going to look like, what it entails, what it means going forward. And it gives them all the information they need to really decide, yes, this meets my goals and it's something I want to pursue, or no, some other sort of exit planning option is where we want to go.
Well, Emmet, I appreciate your time, and hopefully everyone was able to take a lot away from this, but because we literally just scratched the surface on ESOPs, maybe we can convince Brian and the team to bring us back on so we can talk more about this, because this is a great platform. I think more evaluators should really jump on and learn more about this, but mostly to educate their clients, educate attorneys that are out there, because there is a tsunami of transition, and ESOPs could be a great platform for them. So thank you again, Emmet. Brian,
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emmet. A tsunami out there. Hopefully a pleasant tsunami for potential client engagement. We have the poll question that's been up for a few moments. So if you haven't responded yet, be sure to do that. And before we transition to the next segment, we just have a couple of announcements to make. We will be holding a virtual summit December 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th to end our CPE calendar for this year. Some really great sessions, some of them repeated from the conference we held in September. Other sessions are brand new for this event. And if you're needing CPE to close out your recertification, be a great opportunity to register and attend. Also, we'll be holding the recertification recommended courses, industry standards, case analysis by webinar, and current update and valuations the days prior to this summit in December. We have published as an association a great deal of resources relating to artificial intelligence. You can follow the QR code or the link in the slides to access the resources that have been published by the association. And we'll have a quick video from
Hello, this is Roger Grabowski. Later today, I'll be hosting a webinar. If you're doing litigation work, working with lawyers, either in a civil matter or in a tax matter, you probably have found out that lawyers need education about valuation. You're that educator. The webinar will discuss this book. I honchoed putting this book together with a group of very good valuation experts on all kinds of topics that you may come across. It will help you be the educator that you need to be in a litigation environment. Hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Right. We'll now turn this segment over to Alan Zipp and Judge Timothy Driscoll. Hello, Judge Driscoll. Alan?
Hello, Brian. Thank you so much. Now I need to figure out how to share my screen. And okay, I wrote share, do this. I'm looking forward to today's piece because we get to talk to Judge Driscoll and get his perspective. What do I get this to jump up? I'm going to fill the screen with it. Oh, I am so technologically inferior. There it is. Okay. Let's see where. Okay. Thank you. Judge Driscoll, are you there?
I sure am.
Oh,
Thank
wonderful. This is terrific. Everything you say today, by the way, is fully endorsed by Judge Platt. He said so in writing.
That's right. He's bound by it. Yes.
Yeah, he's bound is right. This session is going to be very, very helpful to give the information to us as expert witnesses, because we all do it differently, but we all need some guidance, and you are the right one to guide us. So the question here is how experts can present direct testimony more effectively. And I'm going to throw out a few thoughts and ask you just to give your, position. For example, just how should we prepare? How do we and the retaining attorney prepare for direct examination? And I'll just give you a couple thoughts here and then you talk. should the expert prepare the questions for the attorney, and should they rehearse that direct examination? And then who should be responsible for preparing the direct examination of the expert? And then is a big deal here about significant differences between persuading a judge and teaching a jury. And how should the expert present testimony? And then I throw out this, are sound bites and headlines more effective than detailed explanations?
Wow, I mean, there's a lot in that, and it's a lot to unpack. And I love all of those questions, and I have some views as to all of those questions. But interestingly enough, if any of you are testifying in my courtroom, I reserve the right to have a different view than anything I'm sharing with you today. So these are only my own personal views, and they're at this moment in time. And I say that because just like you're different than you were yesterday and the day before, so too is the judge different than she was the day before and different than she was the day after. So I say that because give yourself permission to be yourself when you are an expert. Alan is a different expert than Brian, who is different than Alina, who is different than Janae, who is different than Michael Kaplan. We all have been given certain gifts by the Creator, and use those gifts. Or to put in the words of Mr. Rogers, a popular television show when I was a kid, there's no better you than you. So I think when we're talking about becoming an effective expert witness, I'll give you some views which are overall views. But the bottom line is you've got to do what works for you. Let me tie that into the question that Alan asked about, should you rehearse? What does rehearsed testimony sound like? It sounds rehearsed. It won't be persuasive. What is direct examination? Direct examination is a conversation where you, the expert, are leading. You, the expert, are leading the discussion based on your training, your experience, your methodology. And if that comes across as flat, then it's not going to be as effective. Now, that said, it does have to be the result of preparation. And because direct examination is not just you talking narratively, but rather responding to counsel's questions, I do think there's some level of preparation that includes a little bit of question and answer. So you can get used to the rhythm of the questioner. I wouldn't mind if you did a full, I don't use the word rehearsal, but a full run through of questions and answers. But if it sounds rehearsed, if it sounds like you're just looking for that response that you've memorized, it's going to come across in that way and be less persuasive. And that goes for a judge or for a jury. A judge, of course, is a professional listener. And a judge who handles business court cases may be, like I am, a specialist in that field, where that's what I'm doing all the time. So the judge might be even more attuned to hearing that rehearsed nature. But juries get it right also. And so the jury will not be as attentive or as pleased to hear you if you are coming across like you have just memorized what it is you're about to say. So I guess the bottom line is tying into what Roger just said a couple of minutes ago when he was talking about the book that he wrote. And that was that, what are you as experts? You're educators, you're teachers. And teachers, think of those best teachers that you had. Those best teachers that you had may have known the material very well. I presume they did. But they didn't come across like they had these memorized bites that they were just pulling out. They came across that they were dynamic. They were responding to you and to the rest of the class at that moment in time. So that's what you have to be. You have to be so prepared that you know what you're talking about, but that's already the case. You already do know what you're talking about. And you have to be interesting so that you keep the finder of facts' attention, and that you do so not just with headlines, tying into Alan's last question, but you have the headlines which might capture the interest. Hey, I'd like to talk about discounted cash flow. And discounted cash flow is whatever it is. All right, that's the headline. And then here's what I did here to build a discounted cash flow. So there is a role for headlines. There is a role for sound bites because, of course, that keeps our attention. But you still need to explain the rigorous analysis that you surely did, which makes you the expert that you are.
Well, thank you. That's a lot. Let me ask you about presentation. Do judges prefer hearing the conclusions first and then the foundation and details? Or
I love that question, because as I'm sitting here today, I say, yeah, I like hearing the conclusion first and then the foundation and details. But maybe in a couple of weeks, I might think differently. I don't know. So I think if that works for you, I think it's helpful, because it's like a hook. It's like a hook, right? We're hanging holiday ornaments, right? We have the hook, and the ornament doesn't hang without the hook, right? So the hook is, well, Judge, okay, I'm going to talk to you about discounted cash flows now, because that's really the essence of my valuation. Okay, good. I've got that in. Judge, my discounted cash flow resulted in a valuation here of $4.2 million. That's great. That's great, because that tells me, okay, I've got where this is going. And then tell me how you got there. So I tend to think that that's helpful, again, as long as you can clearly express what your conclusions are, and then also tell the judge, and judge, or your honor. Remember, you don't call the judge judge unless you know them really well. And that's when you call the judge by their first name, which is judge, right? In the courtroom, it's your honor. I'd like to explain to your honor now how I came to that result, if I may. And the judge, 99 times out of 100, is going to, of course, counsel, because the alternative is, I got to think back. Oh, yeah, what is a discounted cash flow again? Oh, yeah, okay. Because I don't do that every day the way you all do. So the headlines are great, and be prepared to back them up, and be prepared to be interesting along the way. Our best teachers are ones who kept our attention. They kept our attention through knowledge of the material. They kept our attention to the way that we presented it. They kept our attention because they looked at us as we were presenting. And if we were staring off into space or yawning, right, they knew, oh gosh, I've got to reach this student in a different way. So I think you really have to be aware of your audience, and perhaps it may require a different level of preparation, a different level of discussion with judges versus juries. But getting back to 30,000 feet, that being interesting is very important, because you do have to keep either the judge or the jury's attention throughout.
your comments on an alternative. I've done this several times. When you want to become personal and you want to share some personal relationship between your expertise and the findings of the case. So here, this is the alternative. It's after the voir dire and you're qualified. The first question really is, why are you involved in this case? What were you asked to do? And why do you think you're capable of performing the task? Could you comment on that?
I love it. I love it because it orients me right away. It gives me that bottom line conclusion, gives a chance for some headlines. And those of you who have seen me perform here at AVW in the past know that I relate to life through movies and songs. So I'll give you a movie which really expresses that, and that's My Cousin Vinny, a 1992 film, right? And it says a lot about the legal profession, says a lot about judges, but it also says a lot about expert testimony. If you remember the end of the movie, when Vinny, Joe Pesci, calls Sheriff Farley to the stand, and he says to the sheriff, so what'd you find out? Right? And that's the open-ended question. And next thing the sheriff can say, well, acting on a hunch, I realized X, Y, Z. Right? So it got it. What'd you find out? What'd you find out? Give me what's important about that.
Well done. Thank you. I love that movie, by the way.
And by the way, a little trivia about that movie. The actor who plays Sheriff Farley also played D-Day in Animal House. So in case you need some movie trivia.
Okay, thank you. We're often told to tell a story. Now, can you elaborate a little more about what that means in presenting direct testimony? And you mentioned that as an expert, you're a teacher, and favorite teachers are not boring. They're entertaining and interesting. And maybe you've given us all the guidance we need to hear, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that teaching notion?
Yeah, so to speak slowly, you're talking about things that you know all the time and that you say all the time. And when you hang out with a bunch of other business valuators, that's what you talk. I don't necessarily speak that language all the time. And if you're trying the case in front of a jury, they sure as heck aren't speaking that language all the time. So in telling a story, you want to make sure you break it down to the basic level. So, Your Honor, when I'm doing this discounted cash flow, I'm looking first at the revenues that are coming in. And the revenues that are coming in are really the sales here. This company is selling widgets, and that's what I'm looking to. And then, of course, I'm looking to, well, what is the cost of these? And we refer to as cost of goods sold, but it's really, well, what goes into selling that widget? All right, and that gives me an idea of ultimately what some revenue will be. And then I take that each year and I discount it. And why do I discount that, Judge? Well, I discount it because we got to take that dollar in the future and say, well, what would it be worth today? And that's, so again, to explain those basic concepts along the way. I don't know if that's necessarily telling a story as much as it is just taking the time to explain the components of how you get to your conclusions. And again, to be looking at that trier of fact. Easy when you're testifying before a judge, because if the judge is nodding her head, that's great. If the judge is looking into the distance, you might slow down a little bit. You might pause and see if the judge has any questions. I tend to ask a lot of questions in bench trials because I'm the one that's making the decision. So to really recognize that direct testimony as you're telling the story, whatever the story is, you want to make sure that your audience is engaged with you. So don't just be so smart that you speak without knowing or without getting a sense of how your audience is receiving your information.
Wow, thank you. We are told frequently to use powerful language and analogies. For example, a couple of examples here. You have a difference of opinion with opposing expert. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And then the maxim is true. Figures don't lie, but liars sure can figure. And then the precise language question, should we use real names and avoid pronouns like he and she and it and they? Should we avoid acronyms or abbreviations or unfamiliar words whenever we can? Should we avoid hedge words like could or may or apparently and avoid the absolutes of always and never? Can you help us out here? How far can we go or should go?
Wow. It means you got to avoid everything, right? So those first two or those second and third bullets of those nice little aphorisms, I think those are great in debate. Expert testimony is not a debate. To me, those, if you have to differ with the opposing side's expert, if you're doing so in a way that sounds even remotely like an ad hominem attack, you'll lose credibility with the court. And by the way, I say the same thing to lawyers, that, their adversaries don't foolishly say things or stupidly say things. They just say things and, Your Honor, I must disagree with my learned colleague over there. So I'd rather hear you say, if Alan is testifying before me, I'd rather hear him say, Your Honor, I know that you heard the plaintiff's testimony and Ms. Castell is, of course, very experienced. I do disagree with her methodology, and here's why. I'd rather you be the expert that you are rather than trying to distill it into statements that might seem like an attack on the other side. So really do not get, I would say, I feel pretty strongly about this. Don't get caught up in attacking the other side's expert. If anything, that's for retaining counsel to do in the context of summation or opening statement, if opposing counsel has that information available to them in opening. You mentioned the question at the end about pronouns, and our world, of course, is rapidly changing into, choosing your own pronouns and also using what would years ago be considered a plural pronoun for a single individual. And I would just be aware of the jurisdiction that you're in and be aware of the judge's own preferences. My view is inclusivity. Inclusivity, as John Belushi said in Animal House, it don't cost nothing. Don't cost nothing to be inclusive and to use as much inclusive language as possible. On acronyms, it does cost something, right? Unless you define that acronym, make sure the trier of fact is comfortable with it. And I'll just give you one little story about that. I've shared this before, not an acronym, but a way of me testing an expert's ability to relate to people. And the expert had said that he was a 6 Sigma black belt in, I think it was in business valuation. And I said to him, I said, "You're a black belt, huh? Should I be seated a little bit differently from you?" And he said, "Oh, no, Your Honor, that's exclusively a business valuation metric." And I said, "I know what it is. I know what it is. But, can you smile? Can you have a little bit of sense of humor? Can you be a little bit of a recognizing that trial is a tense experience? And if I can find a way to break through that tension a little bit, I'm doing that." So, be a human being. Don't be afraid to be a human being.
That's great.
Oh, and I'm sorry, on always and never, nothing is always and never other than death, taxes, and the New York Jets are never going to win anything. I say that as a beleaguered Jets fan, right? So other than that, there's nothing always and never. It's okay to say, this is what usually happens. This is what I believe is going to happen, right? Because you don't know anything for certain other than death and taxes and the Jets.
I love it. We always have problem areas. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how we should deal with this. There may be weakness in qualifications, credibility or opinions or documentation, that sort of thing. Should this be brought out head on during direct examination or wait for cross? And how should the expert and retaining counsel prepare for testimony dealing with these problem areas? And then is it better to discuss it in the middle of the direct, not at the beginning or end where it'd be most likely remembered to allow time to explain?
So getting to the answer to that last question, it absolutely should be mentioned. Weaknesses should be mentioned on direct. And I believe they're best in the middle. Because if you bring them up at the beginning, let's talk about why to bring them up, why to bring them up at all during direct. Because you know about it and it makes you seem like more of an expert. Hey, you're not perfect. There's some, gap in your resume, or maybe this is only your first time testifying at trial, or, when you testified 3 years ago, the judge didn't find your opinion credible. Hey, that's going to come out. I'd rather you talk about it on your terms, and it takes the sting out on cross-examination. And by the way, that's a tip that we give to lawyers for any weakness in any witness's testimony. And there's the story about the lawyer who forgot to talk about on that his client in a criminal case had been previously convicted twice, right? And on cross-examination, the prosecutor gets up and says, "So you've been convicted twice previously," and the witness says, "Yes, this will be my third conviction." Right? I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a nice little story that we tell. So bring it out on direct, because then you control the narrative. You don't know how that question's going to be asked on cross. You don't know if you're going to be sucked in and it's going to be asked at a point where you're not prepared for it. So this way you're prepared for it. You can talk about it and you can explain it away on your terms.
That's great. Where should we look when we're answering questions on the witness stand?
That's such a great question. Because on direct examination, I think that you should be looking at the lawyer who's asking you the questions. But I would occasionally, just like in polite conversation, you're talking to one person in front of a bunch of people, you'd look at other people in the audience, right? So I think it's okay to occasionally look over at the judge. You answer a question, you look at the judge. The judge might look back at you, and that might inspire the judge to ask a question. The judge asking you a question is great because that shows the judge is either following what you're saying, or perhaps not following and needs some more explanation. On cross-examination, don't get sucked into the rhythm of the cross-examiner. Now, you do have to answer the questions. You do have to answer them yes or no to the extent they can be answered. But as the band Pearl Jam sang, just breathe. Just breathe before you're answering the question, because it's so easy to get sucked into that rhythm. Your name is Alan Zipp, right? You've got Northern Lights behind you in your virtual background, right? And isn't it so that on your picture that you displayed, you had snowing? That means you like to ski, isn't that right? Yes, 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 yes. Instead, Northern Lights in your background? Yes, Northern Lights in my background. All right, it breaks the rhythm of the examiner a little bit. So don't be so eager to get cross-examination over with that you respond immediately to the questions. Breathe a little bit, breathe in and out, and then answer the question. Oh, on cross-examination, don't think about where the examiner is going. That's for retaining counsel. Okay, let retaining counsel think where things are going next. Just answer the question.
you already talked about opposing expert. The last question here, does trashing the other expert make me appear biased and to be an advocate? Should we avoid that?
Don't do that. Don't do that, right? I mean, don't do that unless you want to save 62 cents, because you will never have to send opposing expert a holiday card ever again, right? But short of that, what does it get you? It gets you nowhere. It makes you seem like an advocate. It makes you look petty. It just, and you'll watch the judge. The judge will cringe a little bit as you do that. Do it.
Any final thoughts before we let Mike Kaplan talk?
Oh gosh, well, no, let's let Mike Kaplan talk, because and I see Brian came on. That's usually the time when I'm getting the all right, Judge, that's enough. That's enough.
I want to stay on your Christmas card list.
Do your job. Do your job.
Thank you.
I want to end by saying thank you to our experts, because you make my job so much easier, and I love going to work every day because I get to learn every day. So thank you for helping me to learn.
Judge Driscoll, thank you very, very much. You're incredibly helpful.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Judge Driscoll.
Judge Driscoll, you are absolutely great. We learn so much every time you present for us. And, we're in an area that's very near and dear to my heart, the art of giving expert testimony. I believe it to be an art form. And there are a lot of dynamics that we have to deal with. And giving direct testimony, that's the real job. Direct testimony, effective direct testimony, is much more difficult than withstanding cross-examination. Direct testimony is your opportunity to tell your story. It's your opportunity to persuade the jury, to persuade the judge. Go back to the world of cross-examination, and I would say north of 90% or north of 95% of the questions could be answered with one of the two following words: yes or no. Because good cross-examining counsel is not going to give you the opportunity, or doesn't want to give you the opportunity, to answer with a narrative. Because when you start into a narrative, you can take that anywhere that you want. So think in terms of direct examination being your opportunity to persuade the judge, persuade the jury. And before you give your direct testimony, remember, who is your client in the courtroom? When you are in the courtroom, your client is the trier or triers of fact. You take an oath, and you also have to keep Rule 702, Federal Rule of Evidence 702, in mind, and that is you are there to help the judge and the jury understand the evidence. Now, how do you do that? You want them to pay attention to what you're saying. And one of the things I've learned over the 50 years that I've been doing this, or more than 50 years, is speak to the judge or the jury as if you're testifying before someone who loves you unconditionally.
In other words, my dog.
There you go. Pat him on the, don't pat the judge on the head, but speak to the trier or triers of fact as if they are individuals who love you unconditionally. You are speaking to your mother. You are explaining it in a way that you would explain it to your mother so she could understand it. Or explain it as if your 9-year-old or 10-year-old or 12-year-old child is listening to you. If they can understand your testimony and feel it, when you speak with one of those people who loves you unconditionally, there's a lot of emotion in there, and you feel there's a real connection. There's a real connection, and you are so focused on being sure that they understand it. Too many witnesses that I see that walk into the courtroom and they testify as if they are testifying to the audience on AVW, or they're testifying to a group of MBAs. That type of language doesn't take the ball into the end zone.
This
You can-
point
you-
that you're making, Michael, is I think really huge. The idea of making sure we're communicating at a level that they can digest it, understand it, and use it to come to a conclusion.
That's it, Mel. I mean, you and I have worked together in the past. We've also done educational programs together. We have to communicate at a level. We have to communicate in a way that our audience will embrace it. And
So
you've got jurors who are not that they don't have the same education that we do. We have judges who are often overburdened and they've got a lot of stuff on their minds. So the burden's on us. And I see the opening slide for the next segment.
I think they're pushing both of us out.
So, okay. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Judge Driscoll. And let's move on to our next segment with Dalton the Hopper from the Standards Board, NACFA Standard Board. Is going to talk about professional standards in today's AI environment. Let me get you on and let you start rolling with this, Dalton. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. I appreciate it. And thank you for that introduction. Like you said, the privilege of serving on NACFA Standards Board. And I really want to just take a minute to talk about, I think, an area that's changing faster than almost anything else in our profession right now. And that being the intersection of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and our standards. I think we've all seen the headlines, AI tools that can write reports and analyze data, even generate models and narrative sections of reports. As professionals, we live and breathe our standards, ethics, and professional judgment. And those skills can't be outsourced to an algorithm. So I think we can cover this in kind of 4 key areas. Number 1, how AI is entering into our profession, what that means for our responsibilities, where the ethical and practical risks are emerging, and how we're responding both individually as a group and collectively, and how we can help lead that discussion. Thank you for advancing the slide. You can move on to the next one. So I think the promise of and responsibility that comes with AI, it's no longer science fiction. And we've all seen firms that are experimenting with tools that can do all of these great things. Just actually this morning, I have a 6-year-old and she has an assignment to disguise a turkey. And ChatGPT was the first thing I went to come up with ideas of not just how we can disguise this turkey, but what do we need to do it? And so these tools can increase efficiency, consistency in our work, and even uncover trends that we normally would have missed. I think the key, though, is that AI is an assistant and is not assuming our role. We can delegate tasks, but we can't delegate our judgment. And I think that's what we all need to remember. Our standards already make that clear. Due professional care, integrity and objectivity, and professional competence. These principles haven't changed. Whether we use Excel, an AI model, or a pencil, the responsibility for the conclusion remains with the professional signing that report. So in other words, the tool doesn't sign the report, you do. That means that if we're using AI assisted inputs or models, even language, we need to understand that, validate that, and document how it was used. And that's not a new rule for us. That's nothing, coming out from the standards board. It's just new context for the same ethical expectations that we have. I think that brings us, though, to the next point, which is where it challenges us in the areas of data, transparency, and ethics. So I think there's these few pillars that kind of stand out here. We've got them on the slide. and they align directly with our standards already. Integrity and objectivity. We've always heard, and most of us have probably even said, garbage in, garbage out. With AI, it's garbage in, multiplied garbage out. AI tools, platforms, and systems are only as good as the inputs that we, the professional, put in. And those may be biased, incomplete, or flat out wrong. If an AI model is relying on data from unverified sources or outdated transactions, for example, it can create the illusion of precision without reliability. Our job is to test, question, and verify. And just because the model looks impressive doesn't mean it's right. The next one, relevant and reliable. Can you describe how an AI tool reached a conclusion or a recommendation that it gave? If not, there may be an issue. A conclusion has to be understandable and supportable. And if the logic behind an AI output can't be explained in professional terms, it's difficult to defend. Part of our due diligence is documenting our process. The next one, confidentiality. I think we've all heard of these concerns, and I think we all know about our duty to protect client information. Yet we're all using tools and systems and platforms that could store, learn from, or reuse what we give it, what we upload. Entering client data into public or unvetted AI tools can create some pretty serious and significant confidentiality breaches. And I think it's just an important reminder that before using any platform, we have to understand the data handling policies, and when in doubt, obtain client consent. The next one, professional competence. It's tempting to over-rely on the slickness of an AI model, but we have to remain independent. AI doesn't remove bias. Sometimes it encodes it and multiplies it. We can use these tools, but we can't let them dictate our professional skepticism. Finally, the last one, transparency and disclosure. If AI influenced your analysis or report, consider disclosing that use, whether it affects inputs, assumptions, or outputs. Transparency isn't just best practice, it's becoming an expectation. So I think these 5 pillars summarize the ethical framework that we'll need as AI becomes more and more prevalent in practice. So I think this kind of leads us to the next question of, what about our standards? How are they catching up, and where are they going next? So right now, we have standards that have the necessary ethical anchors, if you will: due professional care, integrity and objectivity, professional competence. None of those things change because we're using AI. We are starting to see guidance emerge, though, that applies these principles in a new or in a modern way that integrates AI. I know we had the resources posted earlier. NACVA's published an advisory brief. It was roughly this time last year around the use of AI and machine learning. In addition, there is a plethora of AI resources, such as the AI Data University, which includes a prompt library. There are also AI-related standards and ethics FAQ libraries out there. I highly recommend checking out this resource. And then there's several webinars in the member portal. I think these developments in these resources suggest that the AI governance, the documenting, the validating, and the disclosing will soon be as much of a part as quality control as technical competence is now. And I think this is where you can move to the next slide. The resources, Brian. This is where we play a vital role. So our standards don't evolve in a vacuum. They evolve through feedback from practitioners. And as NACVA members, we can help lead that conversation for our entire practice and profession. And we can lead that by sharing examples, conversations, success stories, failures, and we can help define what responsible AI use looks like. So let's end with where this leaves us. AI is inevitably going to change how we work. There's no question. It shouldn't change why we work or how we uphold our standards. Our ethical compass remains the same. Due professional care, integrity and objectivity, professional competence, professional judgment. AI can make us faster, but it's our judgment that makes us credible. As this technology evolves for all of us, so will our standards. Let's make sure that they evolve with our input and are grounded in the same principles that have always defined our profession. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you, and please feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you, Dalton. Great having you during this monthly show. Thank you for being with us. I think it's your first time, right? Well, you were interviewed before, but presenting, it was the first time, right?
First time back presenting, yeah.
Yeah, great having you with us. And for the rest, we have our polling question. And now we are going to go with Janae. She's going to be interviewing Dr. Abbot. So she was with us at the beginning and now at the end of our show. Janae.
We'll just bookend it, right? We're going to end strong with Dr. Abbot's calculator. I'm excited for this, Dr. Abbot. Thank you for joining us and being willing to talk about what you've prepared here as a resource for free for valuation practitioners that are looking to support the calculation of a discount for lack of marketability. So what I hope for us to do is to first discuss some of the foundations and the evidence for this calculator. And then I do have the actual calculator pulled up on the website, and we can kind of click through that a little bit to kind of give, sort of a test drive for it. So if you are interested in running through this calculator as we're talking, the URL is on the screen, so you can grab that and kind of follow along if you so choose. So first of all, what kind of data, and I should introduce, Dr. Abbott, I should introduce a little bit about you. I think a lot of us are familiar with you, but you are a professor at West Virginia University. You just got finished teaching a course. You've published extensively, you've presented extensively on various topics, including marketability and size premiums, lots of valuation issues that we're very concerned with. So I appreciate your work in doing that. Okay, with all that said, what kind of data forms the basis for the calculator? Oh, you are still on mute, and we definitely want to hear everything that you say about this. There you go.
Okay. So this is interesting, following up on Dalton. This is not an AI model. Okay. That's one thing that we need to make clear. This is not a simulation. This is real world data. We are using actual transactions that occur every day in every stock that is listed on the US stock markets. So that's the data set that we are using. We are using the daily price for each and every stock that is being traded. We are using their daily volume, and we are using from their quarterly reports or from SEC data, the number of shares that are outstanding. So that gives us the frequency of their trading, the volume of their trading, and the volatility of their daily returns.
Okay.
once we have these, the time period this data covers starts in 2005. So we are looking to acquire data for 2004, but at this point, because in 2004, SEC mandated XBRL, that is all the filings with them had to be done in a machine readable form.
Mhm.
And that's why all of this data has become available.
Mhm.
Before this, even up to 2003, 2004, all of this data was available, but it was available in non-machine readable form, which means that you would need a huge amount of time and effort to translate it to something that you could use with a computer.
Yeah.
And what that did was that a few data providers like CRISP, for example, or CompuStat, large organizations have a huge amount of resources devoted. They become the monopoly providers of good data,
Mhm.
which made a lot of this data outside the reach of a small or medium-sized firm. If you have to pay $200,000 a year, and if you're doing 10 valuations a year, doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
But now, this is interesting, and I started working in this area in about 2009. So one of the advantages of being one of the early participants in this marketplace was that I was able to negotiate a commercial license for the data, which means that I can share the underlying data with the user of this system. Which, if you are, for example, using CRISP data or CompuStat data, you're not, under your contract, you're not allowed to provide the granular data available to anyone that you will be guiding or providing information to. You are allowed to sign, for example, with the Kroll data. They give you a portfolio average or a median or a mean for the data set. They will say firms with size between this million and this million, the average is such and such, but they cannot give you the underlying data. The advantage of what I'm doing is that data is available for sharing with a user.
Okay.
So that's a big difference. So with 2005 onwards data being available, since the minimum period that a stock has to be trading before we can compute a year-long standard deviation of the returns is 1 year. So right now, the usable data, the total data starts in 2005 January, but the usable data starts from 2006 January. So from 2006 to 2024, for every month, for every stock that is traded, you have the ability to form a good, empirically tested, theoretically valid discount number for any month during these 20 years. So you have that available. You have that available as a portfolio, which would be by size, by industry, or more specifically, by the intersection of size and industry. So you want to say, give me a small firm in automobile industry in the month of 2009, October, and you have that sample. Now, if, for example, you're using some kind of a guideline public company situation, and you have the particular ticker for a company that you're using as your comparison standard, you can go in and get the exact value for the discount for blockage or for marketability or both for that month for that stock. So we can be as granular as a particular stock. Okay. The only data that are excluded are the data if the firm has not been trading for at least 1 year.
Okay.
Those will not show up. That's why at the 2005, if you go to January, March, April, those firms, because the data is not extending into 2024 at this time, I'm working with them. Historical data is a little bit more difficult to get than the current one. But the current one is coming in a feed from the stock market. So, but the provider is arranging to get that data available. So hopefully in another month or so, we should be able to offer the discount estimates for 2005 also.
Okay.
Currently, this data ends till December 2024, but we are in the process of updating and working with the data vendors so that this will become updated every quarter up to the end of the last quarter. Like at the end of December 2025, we should have the data available and running for up to September of 2025. And going forward, it will always be lagged by 1 quarter.
Sure. Okay, good. So for anyone who is a little bit familiar with option models, but maybe not an expert yet, how does, conceptually the Margrave formula differ from other option models or formulas that they may have seen, such as Longstaff, Finnerty, Jadaroff?
Okay, let's step back a minute. Finnerty, Gadroff, Longstaff are all exchange option models. They start with the same equation. If you want to look at the categories, the other categories, the Black-Scholes, like the Sheffy's model, when the put that he used. But all of these, Finnerty, Gadroff, Longstaff, they are Margrave exchange models. So these two models came up about a year apart from each other. The Black-Scholes and Margrave, they were published at about the same time. They have been out now for about 50 years. So they're well established, well used, if not thousands, at least hundreds of research papers published with these models. The real difficulty is that when Finnerty and Gadroff did their models, and essentially, I must give credit to Gadroff, he was the one that specifically in our discussions, because in 2009, I started working in this area. My first paper came out in 2009. He had pointed me to Longstaff's 2001 paper, where the real exchange value was established. Before that, it was an exchange ratio. Then Longstaff in 2001 created the whole model basis for converting that option premium into a discount for lack of marketability or liquidity. And in my model, I follow that Longstaff 2001 logic. So it's simply, it says how many shares of the restricted stock would you exchange for an unrestricted stock, one unrestricted stock. At maturity, when the period of restriction is over, at that point, it's a 1-for-1, because once the legend is removed, you become the unrestricted stock and the restricted stock are the same entity. So up to the time approaching that point when the restriction goes away and the exchange is 1-for-1, how many shares of the restricted stock would you give per share? So that's the exchange value. And then now, if let's say you were to give 1.25 shares of restricted stock for one unrestricted stock. So if the unrestricted stock was $100, the restricted stock would be worth $80. So what has happened is that when Finnerty and Gadroff were doing their model formation, they decided, or somehow it got interpreted, that 1.25 exchange ratio means a 25% discount. which in fact is a 20% discount.
Mhm.
That's what Longstaff had clarified in 2001, and that seems to have been neglected in a lot of valuation practice, not in academic literature. There is fairly clear, but a lot of practitioners kind of did not either catch that or realize that. And that ended up in a situation where we see some practitioners saying, oh, the models are not good because they give more than 100% discount.
Okay.
More than 100% discount is an impossibility. But that would literally mean that somebody was offering you restricted stock and giving you some money to please take it off of their hands.
Mhm, mhm.
Doesn't happen.
Right.
So that's a lack of understanding of the model rather than the flaw of the model.
Okay. Okay.
So which in my formulation, which you see in this calculator, we take care of that.
Okay.
So this is the following the 2001 Longstaff. These discounts are done taking care of conversion from exchange ratio into a discount.
Okay.
You have the
I have the calculator pulled up. The
Right.
last, we had the last slide and some questions about caution. I think just as a general
Okay.
caution, we should.
So basically put in any set of values. It's your screen.
Okay. So we have to, December 2024 is the farthest we can go out.
Is the last one, but you
on it.
can go back
Mhm.
anytime up to 2006.
So let's just do 1.5 million, or let's do 10.5 million. Whoops.
Okay. You are starting with a zero.
Yeah, it doesn't like that.
Yeah,
does
just
it?
take that off. Yeah.
Right. Block size, so when I'm putting in the block size, if I have a 5% minority interest
Then
that
put
I'm
in
valuing, just put a 5%, correct?
Put in 5%.
Now the industry, this is just 2-digit only.
Right.
Or I can do a lookup. So
Just look up and see which industry you are interested in.
let's do heavy construction.
16. Yeah.
Okay. And then this last bit is
All
optional.
you have to do is
And-
calculate discount. Just
Okay.
go down further. Here. That's it.
And I know when this
It
comes
is
up,
calculating the data.
yes.
It's
And when
going back, looking at those 46 million transactions, finding the transactions that fit your parameters, and then doing the calculations. And there you are.
right. So it comes up here and it has this blockage discount segment, and then also
Then right. If there's a restriction on trade, then these are the discounts, the
So
DLOMs.
how should an appraiser look at these tables? We've got the Asian average, the Margrave.
Right. These are the three tables that you will see. And those three are based on different assumptions. Where our fundamental assumption of the hypothetical buyer, hypothetical seller, reasonably informed, that's your Margrave exchange model. That's the base model. So there we have, if it's very volatile, if there's a long liquidation period, it's very illiquid, you're saying a discount of about 26%.
Okay.
If it's median, it's about 11%. So it's about average time to liquidation, about average volatility, the number would be 11%.
Okay.
That's the base number that we are starting with.
Okay.
Now, the Asian average model, which a variant of that is the so-called Finity model,
Okay.
that is when it's an insider acquiring stock in full information of all kinds, public and private, everything is available. And there, if you see that, the discounts are smaller because there is less uncertainty. So the discounts are, the median instead of 11% went to 6.5%. And for the very long liquidation, very volatile, instead of 26, it came to 16%.
Okay.
Now, the third variant, the one
Okay.
which is the look back,
Mhm.
or so-called one variation is called the long SAP model. Some people do that. And that is where that whole issue of discounts exceeding 100% show up.
Okay.
So when you correctly apply the model, then we see that the median number is that 21%, and the highest is going as high as 49%.
Mhm.
So essentially what we have is a set of 9 numbers at each point. You see, it's a 3 by 3 matrix.
Yes. Mhm.
The liquidation period from short to medium to long,
Mhm.
volatility from low to medium to high. That intersection defines the discount that you should be using.
Okay.
In my practical experience, I've been now using this model, I've been doing this for about 10 years, is essentially it's easy to defend median with median. It's easier, a little bit less easy, but easy to defend median volatility with a long liquidation period. But once you start going to the extreme, where we say, I have a stock which is very illiquid and very volatile, there you can run into a problem when audited, because in my experience, most of the smaller firms that we work with, they do not have a very high volatility in their returns.
Mm.
They're very illiquid. That
Mhm.
claim is relatively easy to sustain, but saying that they're also extremely volatile can be challenged, because the IRS essentially is going to be looking at this and saying, well, show us how you got this volatility.
Mhm.
And when you actually start calculating that, then that tends to go away.
Okay. I know there's so much more that you could address on this topic, and there's so much more that we as practitioners really dig
Actually, we are
into.
doing a longer version of this
Mhm.
on December 4th,
Yes.
not too far away.
Yes.
So
So,
that will be a whole hour-long thing that we'll
yes.
do. In the
Yeah.
meantime, have the users go in, use the calculator, and obviously, if there are any questions, send those to me. Just send me an email. I look forward to that. And the more questions there are, better we can make it to be a useful idea. It's totally free. There is no data that you have to download. There is no program that you have to install. It's totally resource free. I mean, it doesn't take up any space on your computer, does not take any of your computing power, because all computing is being done on Amazon.
Mhm.
It's in the cloud fully, the
Okay.
data and the software.
Yeah. Yeah, it was easy, just as easy as we showed. So, it's a great tool. It's a great thing to use to
It's a
add.
great tool. It's very defensible. It's available.
Great.
And
Thank you so
best,
much.
for
Oh,
all the members, it's free.
great. Thank you so much for your time and for
You're
putting
very
this
welcome.
together for all of us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Janae, and thank you, Dr. Abbott, and thank you every correspondent and presenter that was with us today. And to all of you that join us today, I hopefully will see you next month. It's going to be our last show of 2025. It's going to be on December 15. And remember that we have ABW in depth after this show. So you can, if you haven't registered, you can do so. And hopefully we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
And before you exit, in the chat, we posted a lot of links to upcoming training, upcoming webinars, including the one that, and we have a question, including the webinar that Dr. Abbott will be presenting in December. So if you missed all of the updates in the chat, scroll through them so you can see them. And what is the question, Adam? Adam Sharp? Not quite sure. All right, well. Oh, no problem, madam. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. Have a good Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you, Brian.